Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, did you know there's a skill many men never learn that ends up seriously limiting your professional success and satisfaction in your love and sex life? I put together a free guide to explain this unknown skill and give you exactly what you need to use it today. Get it by heading over to shanajamescoaching.com or text the word ALIVE, A-L-I-V-E, to 44144. That's 44144. You'll also get access to Man Alive outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I am excited to be here today to talk about a new emerging story for men and masculinity. And with Man Alive, the focus is on you listening, having a life you love, in all realms, right? Feeling fulfilled, feeling satisfied, having meaning, having love, having the success you want. And there are a lot of different ideas in this day and age about what success is and what that looks like and the power it takes to, feel successful. And my guest, Chris Kyle, is here to really, I would say unravel some of this and talk about a new and emerging, as he was saying to me before. It's not necessarily set yet, but it's this emerging story of who men can be, I think, in a way that's more fulfilling in the world. So thank you, Chris, so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Shana. Great to be here.
Yeah. So let me give Chris a quick intro and then we'll dive into the topic and get going with it. So Chris is a business coach, speaker, and e-learning expert who's committed to empowering global messengers. He's the creator of Launch Academy, a live online training program that guides participants through a proven process to build their online learning platform and grow their global community. And he also created the Power of Purpose Global Summit, the Man on Purpose 7-week online course, co-hosted the Conscious Men Summit. So basically, he's been facilitating men's trainings and circles for nearly 20 years. He's also a certified leader in the Mankind Project, sits on the MKP National Board. So let's just say, Chris, you've been around and you've done your work, and you've supported, thousands of men in doing their work. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And, I've been inspired by you and inspired by not just the work you've done, but the way you've shown up in a personal connection. We haven't had that much interaction, but it's just one of the things I do with men, right, is pay attention from the moment we meet, how I feel in a man's presence, whether I feel respected or cared about, or there's a kind of deeper intimacy or connection that's available there. And so, I didn't even know I was going to say this, but I'll say,
That's great.
yeah, with you that, you've always just felt so supportive and trustworthy and, a good man doing good things on the planet. So
thank you. Thank you, Shana. I appreciate that. And I feel seen and supported by you. So thank you.
Good. So let's talk about this new emerging story for men and the masculine, and, a story that goes beyond power, beyond money, beyond position. What would you say to start us off, right? What would you say is this new emerging story? We'll just dive right into it, right? Because that's a small question, but what would you say this new emerging story that you see is?
Yeah. And let me start by just saying a little bit about what I mean by story.
Great.
Because that's kind of, it can be used in so many different ways. And you read a story, you tell a story, or there's kind of a quality of the mythic story, right? Yes. Yeah. So when I talk about story, and a lot of other people are talking about this, Charles Eisenstein and others, it's really the story of our own lives. So you could look at the personal story, you could look at an organizational story, and you could certainly look at a cultural story.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is it's really the story that's unfolding of our lives, that at some level we have the capacity to change that story, to rewrite that story. We could keep telling the default story. And so for our
that's interesting.
Yeah, there's like a default story that even if I'm not conscious and aware, if I'm just kind of tripping through my life, I'm living inside some kind of story.
Right.
Now, the personal story is really, I see it as the story of our lives from our birth, right? So our childhood and our wounding and our patterning and what our successes were, what our failures were, that we built up a certain story about ourselves. So I actually have a story about myself. I tell a certain story about who I am, and this is what I'm this is what I'm about.
Right. And interesting too, I think, to your point, how we can get stuck in those stories and define ourselves in, this might be a side note from where you're going, but we can define ourselves within a story, or get stuck in a story, or have an idea about ourselves, or make these decisions about the world based on this story that we continue to tell ourselves. And I know I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, in your work with men in facilitation, that, there are moments where we can pop out of our story about ourselves, or see ourselves in a whole new light. And sometimes that takes a kind of reflection from someone else to be able to see that about ourselves.
Absolutely. You nailed it, is that there's this quality of our story being all the beliefs that we have ourselves, all of the patterning. A lot of it can be negative. We keep telling ourselves a negative shame-based story. And maybe we'll get into this a little later, is this whole unique flavor of men in shame, the shame that men hold maybe differently than the way women would hold shame. And it's really interesting because that story does play out, as you say. We kind of keep playing out that story in our lives, and some of it is based on the negative belief structure, right? The inner bullies and the critic and all that kind of run our mental story. And then on the other side of that, or not the other side, but outside of ourselves, then what encompasses all of us in human society is the cultural story.
Yes.
And the cultural story is a co-created story that's been working and growing and shifting for thousands and thousands of years of human history. And yes, the story is shifting. Maybe it's evolving. We don't have quite the level of brutality on the planet that was once there 1,000 years ago, but it's still there and in different ways, but it's shifting or changing. And so we can see this unfolding of our cultural story. So the question that you're asking, and the question that we're in right now, is, as we look at these stories, both my own story and a personal story, maybe there's even a family story, and then the cultural story, is how do we look at what might be emerging as a new, more evolved story? That's the thing. So it's like understanding that we have an aspiration as human beings to be better, to grow, to see how we can make change in the world and solve problems. And, some people are more attuned to that than others, right? Others are much more, I want mine, I'm going to make my money, I'm going to have my car and my house. But then the question is what is this new emerging story? And funny, when you first started on our call here and you gave me this beautiful reflection, I would say you are pointing to what I see as a possible new emerging story for men.
Which is?
Which is that the old story, at least the cultural story for men, is that my success as a man, which is so important to men, is to be at some level a success in the world, and to be, the old story is kind of protect and provide, protector, provider. And so that success currently still living inside that story, both inside for men and in the culture, is that success is based primarily on money, power, and position.
Yes.
Money, power, and position. So if I have money, certain level of success, who cares about position and power? Or I have a certain amount of power, even if I don't have a lot of money, I find myself successful. Or even just a position. I have a title in an organization that gives me certain access. And I think the new emerging story is that is not the definition for success for men.
Well, no. And I work with so many men who have reached those, they've gained the titles, they've accomplished what they set out to, they've checked the box on the expectations. And yet then they're looking around. At some point, there's some kind of wake-up call, whether it's from, a partner or a wife, or from their kids, or from something that happens in their business. And they look around and think, oh my God, okay, I've checked all these boxes and I've done what I should, but why am I not feeling happy? Or why am I not feeling fulfilled? Or why, go to the title of this podcast, right? Man Alive. So many men I've seen walk around feeling like they're dying inside in some way or another.
That's absolutely. I experienced that too. A lot of the men that come to the Mankind Project, New Warrior Training Adventure, are in that question. Even if they have a lot of success in their life, something is not working or something has died. And then there's also men that come who are in breakdown around that, meaning they've melted down their life because it's no longer working for them, or some crisis has happened in their life that's forced them to take a deeper look. And to be honest, you know, Shana, with most men, at least today, it's usually the crisis that brings us to our knees.
Yes.
And then there's some, it's generally hard for a man that's kind of cruising along to go, gosh, I really need to go deeper here. You know? But I think that's...
I should deconstruct my life and my success.
Exactly. But even the millennials and millennial men and all that, I start to see that much more proactive willingness in this changing story to say, I want to be more fulfilled. I really want to work on myself, even if it's nothing's particularly breaking down in my life. And that's part of this new emerging story. And I'd love to hear your response to this, but the overarching theme for men particularly, as it's the new story, and if I'm gonna be a co-creator in changing the story or shifting my own story to be more empowered, alive, fulfilled, then it's an inside-out job. Period. The new story is an inside-out job that I need to go inside, excavate who I am as a man. What are those belief structures? What is the old story that doesn't serve me? And then be like a warrior committed on that path. If this is going to help me be a better man and more engaged, I can't see it now, but I can feel that there's something calling me. And that's an inside out job. I need to go in rather than primarily the old story is I foist myself. This is power over. Remember, power with versus power over. As a man, I foist myself out into the world to create my destiny by pushing my energy and my ego out into the world. And to be honest, that's still a model that is showing that there is a certain level of success in the old success model for that, right? I bring my ego fully out and I can get position, I can get more money, and I can have more power. And we know that so often men check those boxes, like you say, and they're unhappy, unfulfilled, or completely burned out, or have heart attacks or disease or any number of things. So it's not the pathway that's really for health and vibrancy for anybody, particularly for men and women, but particularly for men, because of this drive to be that protector, provider, make the big money, have the power to do whatever I want. It's such a pull.
Such a pull. And I love that you just said that, right? Protector and provider, because I often see men, you know, who, right, there's integrity in that for them. And there's a sense of purpose. You know, I am a protector, I am a provider, I am the rock. And then I haven't released this one yet, but, you know, I did a conversation with a man who's married, and he was willing to be vulnerable about this struggle of, well, when I am the rock and the provider and the calm, solid one, my wife is attracted to me. And when I'm not, she isn't, right? And so how to navigate that. And this isn't all about, you know, relationship, love, sex, whatever, but sometimes that's a really concrete way to be able to see it, right? The world responds to me, or the world says yes to me when I exhibit these certain qualities in the old paradigm, right, of power and strength. But right, in this new emerging story, what is a new way of being strong, right? Vulnerability to me is one of the strongest expressions a man can bring, actually. Yes.
And that's really well said. That I would add to that the whole protector provider is not wrong. I'm not making that bad. That's a beautiful energy to have. And much like in the integral world, the integral theory, it's this idea of transcend and include. So there is an inclusion of that masculine pride and sense of that I can provide, I am able to protect in a certain way. The problem is that alone, as it becomes kind of the driver and definer, as men get trapped in that.
Yes, and lose themselves.
And lose themselves in
their own right to feel, I mean, just on the most basic level, right? To feel happy or to feel good or to feel fulfilled in that way.
Right. And then some of the strength then comes from having a much fuller range. And we talk about this a lot in the men's work, is bringing a full range of who you are, which is at times that grounded rock, you know, the mountain that that your partner, swirls around, right? And then there's also the times of just dropping into the grief or the tenderness or the sadness, opening your heart. And that'll, that in a way will melt your partner as much as having that rock and that mountain. But it's this idea of, can I find the fuller range of who I am as a man? Right. And that is adding these things of, I can be more vulnerable and it's not going to kill me.
Yes.
Right? At one point in our life, and men, when we were vulnerable for thousands of years, when there was a quality of being vulnerable or softening or not being aware, it could get you killed.
Right.
Very easily. So there's a DNA and an old brain kind of component of that kind of hyper vigilance that men hold around their weakness or around vulnerability.
Right. Or calling vulnerability weakness But, as you said that too, I just thought, right, what is it like to be in the world, in relationship with nothing to prove? Right? With not trying to get to, I'm good enough, I'm strong enough, I'm smart enough, I'm rock enough, or whatever that may be. Right? To me, that opens up a whole new world of freedom for men that I'm imagining is part of your emerging story. Yeah,
the emerging story is to free ourselves from the shackles of partly the cultural story, but our own inner bullies, as I call it. I teach about inner bullies, just the inner critic, taming the gremlins. But in my Man on Purpose course, we talk about inner bullies and the sort of inner bully archetypes, kind of trying to nail, what are the 10 or 12 or 13 key archetypes of the story that we keep telling ourselves of I'm the good boy and the protector and play it again, Sam. I've got all these things that are working me. And as I go in to excavate that, as I go inward to look at my wounds, or in the parlance of Jung, the shadows, those belief structures, those negative belief structures that I hide, repress, and deny. As I begin to look at those and bring those out into the light, I'm naturally going to start shifting the story that I hold of myself, that, wow, I can actually touch that sadness and grief that's been there for 40 years. I can open my heart a little more to the men in my life and to the women in my life, to my partners. And that what I start to see is that there's more love and light that comes in, that there's more capacity.
The cracks, as in Leonard Cohen, the cracks are where the light actually.
I let the light in. And so that becomes this inside out story. The new story is that I begin to clear out my closet. As my good friend Lion Goodman would say, he had a program called the Belief Closet, and he changed the name since then. But it was really going in to look at the closet of all these stories and beliefs, and then to begin to just chuck it out and clean the closet out and open the space for like what's here. And part of the new story is to see that what's here is a beautiful, open, strong, vulnerable, tender, loving, fierce man.
Yes, I love all of those words combined, right?
Exactly. And then what starts to come out that I hope is part of the new story, and everybody will have their own way or an own way of speaking to this, but that there are qualities of greater compassion, the sense of vulnerability is strength, of vulnerability is honesty, right? As directness, more heartedness in what we do. So dropping from our head into our heart, particularly for men, all that kind of sense of the strong intellect, the strong sense of the black and white and the mental construct into the heart, and then really beginning to bring more of our accountability and our sense of justice and support of what's the good and the beautiful. Yeah. So, it's sort of like all of a sudden these qualities that don't get very little press time for men start to bubble up as that's the new story.
Right. And start to become actually more accepted and more the norm.
Not only for my own healing, Shana, of the norm of that I just first focus on my own healing. But then, yes, that starts to create a new cultural ripple for men. And I see it. So I've been in the Mankind Project for 20 years. I did my weekend in 1998. It was 32 years old. It just blew me open, blew like the top of my head open. And I got really honest with myself, which is another track for men that are moving into a new story for their own lives, is to get really honest with ourselves of what's real, what's not, what's important to us. Yeah. And it really
and not based on the expectations that you've been raised in, but like actually being willing to discover that for yourself.
Exactly. And that led me to that time to get a divorce. I got a divorce within like 9 months after that, which was long time coming. I mean, but just got really honest to open the space for me. What do I want? What do I really want? What am I here to bring? What am I here to give? What is the service that I bring? And then that's where you're hearing so much around purpose, for both men and women, but to get men into a conversation with themselves and with others around them is, this is what's really calling me.
Yeah, well, and I love those deeper questions, right? I was talking to someone today about how it can be really easy to just walk through life and take one step after another. And right, I'm doing this work, I'm having this family, I'm doing this thing. But right, when you stop and actually ask, I wonder, what am I here for? Or what do I want to accomplish or experience before I die?
Right.
What do I want to leave? What is my legacy? I think as we start getting older, right, then there's this sense of, what is the legacy I want to leave?
And how do I want to contribute now at this stage of my life?
Exactly.
What does the next few years look like, or the next 20 years of my life? Where would I like to spend my time and energy? And look, it's a hard one. I mean, the journey that I've been on personally, from that moment of kind of really stepping into my deeper work on me as a man and working with other men and sitting in men's circles I've literally sat in a men's circle either weekly or every other week now for 20 years almost.
Wow. Yeah.
So
that's
different groups.
That is
and it's fun. And these are men that I love and that love me and support each other. And sometimes it's deep, and other times I'm just providing my insight and support and service to men. We go through waves, but it's 20 years of building deeper relationships with other men, doing my work, finding other avenues to do my work, but feeling really supported in the process. And that's the other part of the emerging story for men individually, and I think culturally, is you don't have to do it alone.
Yes.
Such a lone wolf quality out in the world for men is I got it handled, don't worry. Or I ask for support in very narrow ways. Really asking for support and really being willing to receive, not only from those close to me or from my partner and all that, but to also receive from other men.
Yes.
To learn how to come into right relationship and in powerful, connected relationship with other men. A big part of the healing cultural story is that men can learn to heal essentially their deepest wound, which is the father wound of, wanting approval or feeling disconnected from father or abusive father or no father around, that there's this deep wound that it's hard to trust other men at some level. Even if we say we do, other men other than our brother or somebody we love, the rest of the world is like, ooh, there's this competition. There's this sense of, I don't know if I can deeply trust you as another man, even if I know you, even if you're a friend or an acquaintance. And that's a deep rift.
I mean, right. The help part and the ability to receive, I think, has in traditional ways been looked at as a feminine quality, right? But it's not. It's more of I would call it more of a human quality. And I think it is something that a lot of great men or men who identify as nice guys, so generous. The men I work with are so generous and kind and loving. And yet then if you can't receive help or support or that kind of love, or if, you feel like you need to put on that mask to be strong and powerful in order to get love, and the love doesn't actually get in to touch you, right? So I think receiving is a huge quality, or a really important quality,
very much so,
to cultivate. And I'm going back to something you said before. There's so many things you said, it's hard to even keep track in this moment, but it was the question of, how do you want to contribute right now? How do you want to contribute, in this next year or two or phase of your life? And it just had me wonder, wow, what are these questions that a man could walk away from hearing this, and instead of having an answer, right? Instead of having to have an answer to something, to live inside of a question that would actually open up this new story, or that would help open up this new story for him. I got curious, like, what would the best questions be for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. And I'll speak through my own experience of what are the questions that I've asked myself over the years and even now. And I think the first one starts always is, well, who am I? What really, and who am I would say is both the light and the dark of my being. So I know I've had to ask for, who am I in my pattern and in my darkness? And I understand that and look at that more. And in the men's work that I do, it's a lot of looking at those shadow beliefs, the shadows. So I'm able to own my shadows. So for example, one of my deepest shadow beliefs or wounded beliefs is that I'm not wanted. That's a flavor that many men will hear, is that I'm not loved, that I'm not seen, all that variation. But mine's particularly because of my particular growing up was feeling not wanted. Nobody was really there for me. You know what I mean? It was, at my birth in an incubator, and then young childhood, a divorce. So it was sort of like that. So run me as a belief structure that if I'm not wanted, then all the compensatory behaviors are, I'm going to show you how great I am. Shane. I'm going to do this, and I'm a great student, and I'm going to do all these things, and I'm just check off.
Succeed in all of these ways.
Exactly. At a cost, drive myself. And
into the ground probably, right? You can drive
at times, absolutely at times, and into a place where health was, where it was really bad on my health. And so
thank you for being an example. Even, before you go on, I just want to thank you for being an example and being willing to say that out loud into the world, right? Because I think that's modeling exactly right when you don't have the shame around that, or as much, you're not caught in the shame around it, then we can say, oh, well, my biggest fear is that I'm not wanted, or I'm afraid I'm going to do this and you're not going to love me anymore, or I'm afraid I'm going to do this in the work world and, I'm going to lose your respect, or I'm going to lose your following or whatever. And to be able to actually put that out in the world, I think that to me is that new story, where we're not held in the shackles, like you said. And
it's refreshing too when somebody can bring that forward and just speak so authentically about the light and the dark. And so that's the question, for that I keep asking myself, and I'm currently still excavating that, not as a way of like a spiral down, but what are the nuances that are still impacting my behavior? Do you know what I mean? Like, how is this pattern of me now? It's a little bit of the lone wolf, is that not being wanted has so much of this thing, like, I've got it handled. I got it. I can do it. I can do it alone. So I still kind of feel that pull rather than ask for support or lean in or say no. And it's okay to say no, so all these things that I'm still working at those edges.
Well, I think this is obvious, but I just want to say it because I think it's helpful for a lot of my clients to hear, and it's helpful for me to even hear myself say it, which is, just because you realized or found those shadows doesn't then mean they just disappear, or you should be over them, or, that you're weak or not good enough somehow because you still face those shadows, right? I mean, the reality is that we continue to be more and more conscious, but we have to actually continue to, step back and look at the things we're choosing and bring our own awareness and our own acceptance and compassion, and not make ourselves wrong for the fact that, oh, I'm not on the other side of that yet, or I'm not where I thought I would be yet.
Yeah, and that's great. I'm glad you bookmarked that, because that is important. It's so easy to say, well, I've looked at this 2 or 3 times. I should freaking be done with this. God, why is this coming up? But as my own
I'm laughing, but it's so painful. It's so painful when that happens.
But as my spiritual teacher says so beautifully, is that we all have likely a core heartbreak or a core wound then there's lots of variations spun off that, but we each have a core heartbreak. And probably for most of our life, that core heartbreak or that core wound that we hold will always at some level work us and trip us up. But what'll happen is as we bring more presence to it, like you said, more consciousness, more awareness of how the behaviors drive from that, I begin to see more porousness around it, less impact, less energy that it has. And that when it does trip me up, it's almost humorous now, Shane. It's like funny. It's like funny. I go,
there's that part of me again.
Rather than, oh shit, and God damn it, and why, it's like, oh, there it is again. And I can catch myself and within seconds be back grounded, present, like, okay, there it is. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for sharing. And now I'm here. I'm present. I'm
well, and I have a personal question, which is for men who are just starting to catch sight of some of these shadows. Now at this point, right? You said within seconds I can get back and I can see it and it's humorous, but I'm imagining that you've spent, hours and hours with tears and yelling and screaming and releasing. And so I just want to paint that picture too. If you could say a little bit about what that's been like, so that a man who isn't yet where you are doesn't feel like, well, that's, where I should be. I should be able to catch it in a couple seconds and laugh at it.
Right. Yeah. No, it's 20 years of work, yes, but 20 years of joyful work, right?
Mm-hmm.
With good men and men I love and care about, and doing workshops and being, literally moving through my leadership development and the MKP work.
Mm-hmm.
It could be anything. I mean, it could be other programs, but yes, I think it's so important that there's a willingness to, with a certain level of commitment and even joyful service to self,
Mm-hmm.
is that I'm going to still be in that. I'm going to find ways to work with it. And whether that's with a therapist, in a men's circle, in workshops, in a triad of sorts, there's so many ways to do the work.
Well, and just to clarify though, when you say joyful service to self, it's not that all of your moments have been joyful though, right?
No, meaning that I want it to sound, here's the thing is I'm trying to make it, for so many years I said, got to do the work, right?
Yeah, the work.
Yeah, work, go in and do the deep work. And I noticed that time and time again, it felt like, oh, geez, fuck. This is like heavy all the time. And yes, at times it will be heavy, but there is a quality of, this is a gift to yourself.
Yes. Even
in the dark moments, or even in that challenging moment where you're being confronted with your behavior and your shadows, are you in those moments? It's not joyful, but that this is service to yourself. This is a gift.
And so part of the shift you've made is from framing it as, this kind of deep, grueling work, to recognizing, this is a gift I'm giving to myself. I can accept this, right? I can accept the yelling, the screaming, the crying, the grief. Is that part of what you've done? Is change your idea of that? All of that.
And I've done, the sweat, tears, blood, vomit, done it all, in service of clearing the closet out. Right. And I guess to ground it for men that are, I assume a lot of your men listening are already probably, interested in diving deeper into themselves.
Yes, I would say
work, and probably already in men's circles and all that. But I would say that I do know that you got to give the benefit, right, too, for men. Is I absolutely know my relationships are way better and way healthier. Have been over the years, have gotten better and better. I feel more engaged in purposeful work. I feel more committed to that. Much better boundaries around what doesn't work for me in my life or what's not healthy for me. And so I feel like my health and my relationships and my work are all like much more alive and more full and rich because of my willingness to just do that inner work, whatever that is. I mean, so that's what's such the flip here is you could try to press out into the world and create another company or start a company or join a company and go online and just kind of do all the dating services. You could keep doing that. And what you'll do is, I know this for my own self, is you'll keep meeting yourself wherever
you go.
Right
there
here.
You are. I tried to do that going to India and Thailand.
Right.
I'm still fucking here.
And then a lot of times it's just escapism, right, Shayna? A lot of times we do those things to just escape from it. We think it'll give us something, but we're looking outside and going somewhere, or traveling, or a new job to hopefully shift things for us. And ultimately, sometimes it will help in the sense of more space or a challenge that brings more of us. Yeah. And it's a lot of times it'll be the crisis of all those things, the marriage that's falling apart and the job, fired at a job, all that, I think is a great starting point for so many people to just kind of step into, okay, I can see how this has not been working for many years. And now what do I do? And now what do I want? And my question, then the next question is that if there is this, who am I? Then the next question is, really, what am I willing to take on? I think that's the bridge question, is what am I willing to do to create the life I want?
What am I willing to do to create the life I want?
And it could be a rhetorical question, but I think it's an important question for our brains. Some of these simple questions are so important, so that it could be, I'm willing to do anything to create the joyful, alive life that I want. Like, am I really willing to do anything? Yeah, okay, I'm going to sign up for that program, or I'm going to dive into deep one-on-one therapy and work on this mom thing that's just kicking my ass. Whatever it is, it's like willingness to go into it, into the cave, and then see what comes out on the other side.
Right. I love that too.
Yeah. And then the third question.
One of my questions today that I asked myself of, what would I do? Maybe not if I wasn't afraid. I think I asked myself, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? Or what would I do, like, even with the fear? right?
Yes.
To accomplish something. But yeah, tell me your third
Well,
question.
that's a great question too, is then as you get on the other side of those first questions is who am I? What am I willing to do to find out about who I am and the life that I want to live? And then the third, I think, key question is what is most calling me to in my life to give my time, energy, gifts, skills, like that at some point. And there's probably lots of little questions, like you were saying, between these, like, what would I do if fear wasn't in my world, in my way? But this is the ultimate question of the journey inward. What am I willing to do? I'm really willing to do whatever it takes to create the life I want. Then I think what comes out, the only question is, how do I serve? Like in a way that I feel alive and connected, and maybe that's even, I work at a job and I make good income from that, but I am so committed to this other project that I do around that job.
Right. It can look different for every man, but I love that you just said, how do I serve? And then added, in a way that I feel alive and fulfilled, right? Because I think that's what we've been talking about a lot, is that the part that can go missing is the part where a man gets to feel alive and fulfilled being in service versus he's just going to do this service or create this business out in the world.
Right. And then almost those two questions, I said almost a side question is, and this is kind of a rhetorical question too, but is, am I willing to reject what I call the default life? Am I willing to actually walk my own path, be my own authentic man, and reject the default life? And the default life is, I'm born, I go to school, I go to college or some kind of technical school, I get a good job, I make the money so I can have a house, maybe have a partner and kids and dogs and all that. And then I kind of hope that then there may be some grandkids, and then in my retirement I can go traveling or sport fishing, and then I die. And to be honest, there's lots of variations of that, but that is the default life that we're taught. Good automatons.
And it sounds like what you're saying is the willingness to actually look inside and see, God, what's going to light me up, and what's going to be my contribution to the world.
Exactly. And if there's a book inside of you, maybe you have to go 2 years, living in some small little place in a smaller town or traveling abroad, and write your book. I have a good friend, this guy Matteo, who I met at Esalen a bunch of years ago, and he was a struggling actor and just couldn't make it work, and was trying so many little different things, and had a movie idea in him. And he just finished an 8-year project of a documentary film that's all about his journey as this Italian man. It's called Arginazzi, which is the art of organizing your life. And he finished it, and it's at the Mill Valley Film Festival.
Oh, cool.
So I mean, like, people, the default life, people would look at him and go, God, what are you doing? Yeah. Looking crazy. But he had this journey, had this creative spark in him. He wanted to develop something. And this could be that creative project that opens up a lot more for him, possibly, or not. But now he's got this movie that looks amazing. And he got the arrows. He got the arrows. What I mean by arrows is the arrows from other people and from the culture that says that is bad.
Right. And actually starting to discern the arrows from your own heart, from your truth, from your intuition, from your connections, right? Not from, is this going to give me, again, back to the beginning, money, power, position, but is this actually going to give me fulfillment? Am I going to be in service?
Right. That's right.
So we could, again, I feel like I end all these conversations like, oh yeah, we could talk about this for days.
Forever.
Days,
right.
But
yeah,
besides these questions, I think are so powerful, and I think that's enough. And is there anything else you want to leave men with? Yeah,
great. Always that the final thoughts, because I do these interviews too, Shana, and it's great. I love that final thoughts question. So I'm just going to check in. So just modeling. I'm just checking in my own heart. Yeah, what's coming to me, Shana, right now is that the message in all that we've talked about here is a willingness for you as a man to come home to your own heart. Like really come home to who you are at your core, the beauty of who you are, the power, the passion, the vulnerability is coming home to you. And so everything we've talked about is a lot about your willingness to come home to you and let go of all the stories, let go of the cultural expectations of you and family expectations, and see what lights you up from inside. See what brings your heart alive. And that's many different things. It's not just the work that you may be doing, but to just really open yourself. And when that heart starts to get lit up and more alive and more open, then so much wonder and beauty comes in terms of relationships and work and connection, just how you feel in the world day to day, your happiness level. And so come home to your heart. Be willing to give yourself that gift. And that may mean doing the hard work of going in and getting the shit out of the way for your heart to shine.
I love it. I love it. And for you listening, I would just say, I know sometimes we all have different language, right? And for some of you listening, coming home to your heart may seem abstract, but I love how you also just said at the end, right? It's like coming home to what is true for you, what's real for you, not other people's expectations and shoulds and the culture and your parents and your family and your school and all the ways you were raised, but actually being willing to really look, what do I want? What's going to make me happy? It's going to be my contribution to the world. And, that if you can actually put some attention on that every day, even if it's a couple minutes, to just start when you wake up in the morning or sometime in the middle of the day, to just put attention on what is that. I love the idea of, and it's been really useful for a lot of my clients to live inside of these questions, like I was saying, instead of immediately needing to rush to an answer.
Yes.
So sit with that question. Who am I? And, what do I want to bring to the world? And to let yourself actually be in those questions and let them guide you is my wish for you.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, Shana.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, videos, and raw footage I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.